Number 1. The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. This 1965 British thriller was directed by Martin Ritt and adapted from Jean Le Carre's novel of the same name. Richard Burton plays Alec Leamis, a British intelligence agent who has just watched his last contact in East Berlin get shot dead at the wall. His operation has collapsed, his covert network is gone, and the British intelligence, rather than bringing him in, sends him back out on one final mission. The plan is to make Leamis look like a burned-out drunk, someone the East Germans might recruit, and use that fake defection to plant false information that will destroy a senior East German intelligence officer named Mund. The real payoff comes at the end, when Leamis finally realizes the full truth behind the mission. It was never what they told him it was, and the man he was sent to destroy was never the real target. Worse still, the woman he loved, an innocent woman who trusted him, ends up destroyed by the very operation he was part of. In the final scene, Burton stands at the Berlin Wall, and you can see the exact moment a man realizes he has nothing left worth saving. It's one of the bleakest and most perfect endings the spy genre has ever produced. This was the first major Hollywood spy film to argue that Western intelligence agencies are not the good guys, that the men running operations from comfortable offices in London are willing to sacrifice anyone, their own agents, innocent people, to protect a useful asset or win a bureaucratic chess match. Jean Le Carre himself, who spent years working for British intelligence before becoming a writer, called it the only film adaptation of his work he was ever genuinely proud of. At the 1966 BAFTA Awards, it won Best Film and Best British Actor for Burton, and critics at the time called it the anti-Bond, the corrective to everything the James Bond films were selling audiences about what espionage actually looked like. This film sits at the very bottom of the list, not because it's the weakest film here, but because in 1965, audiences just weren't ready for it. Britannica recorded that despite critical success, the film attracted little interest from moviegoers, as people were still too deep in Bond fever to sit with what this film was actually saying. However, the films above this came when the world had already outgrown Bond fever and was ready, genuinely ready, for something that would raise the bar completely. Number 2. 3 Days of the Condor. This 1975 American spy thriller asks one of the most terrifying questions ever put on screen. What happens when the most dangerous organization in the world decides it wants you dead? And that organization isn't a foreign enemy, a terrorist group, or a shadowy cartel. It's your own government. This film was directed by Sidney Pollack and stars Robert Redford as Joe Turner, a low-level CIA researcher who spends his days in a New York brownstone reading books and magazines from around the world, looking for coded intelligence patterns. He is not a field agent. He is not trained to fight, shoot, or run. He is, by his own admission, just a reader. And when he returns from lunch one afternoon to find his entire team shot dead inside the office, he has no idea who did it, why, or who he can trust inside the agency to report it to. Here's what makes the movie genuinely great. Turner survives. He exposes the conspiracy to the New York Times, and the film's final exchange has a CIA official calmly asking him, "So what makes you think they'll print it?" Turner has no answer. The film grossed over $30 million worldwide on a budget of under $15 million, and it was a direct influence on every subsequent government conspiracy thriller Hollywood made, from the Jason Bourne films to Enemy of the State to the Captain America Winter Soldier storyline decades later. 3 Days of the Condor earns a level 2 because, unlike The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, which arrived before audiences were ready to believe it, the world had finally caught up. The film came out a year after a sitting U.S. president resigned in disgrace, while Congress was publicly dismantling the CIA's secret programs, illegal wiretaps, assassination plots, and domestic surveillance. The paranoia in this film wasn't fiction anymore. It was the evening news, and according to former Soviet intelligence officer Sergei Tretyakov, the KGB watched this film and took it so seriously that they built an actual intelligence unit modeled on the fictional CIA office shown in it. 3 Days of the Condor shows you convincingly that the conspiracy lives inside your own government, but the next film on the list traps you in a room with the enemy. Number 3. Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Every spy movie has a villain you can see coming. A foreign agent, a rogue operative, a shadowy organization operating from the outside. However, in this 2011 Cold War spy thriller, the enemy is one of the 5 men who built British intelligence from the ground up, only to later quietly burn it down from the inside. And here is what makes this film genuinely unbearable. Every single person you would trust to find him is also a suspect. The film stars Gary Oldman as George Smiley, a senior British intelligence officer who has been pushed out of the service following a disastrous operation in Budapest. From retirement, he is quietly asked to return for one purpose: to identify a Soviet mole who has been embedded at the very top of British intelligence. One of 5 men, each of whom Smiley has known for decades. When the mole is finally identified and confronted, the scene is not dramatic in the conventional sense. There is no shouting, no violence, just 2 old men in a room, and a conversation that dismantles 30 years of shared history in the space of a few quiet sentences. It is more chilling than any action sequence in any spy film I have watched. The film is based on John le Carre's 1974 novel, and was produced with a budget of £20 million. It won the BAFTA for Best Film, and was nominated for 3 Academy Awards, including Best Actor for Oldman. What separates this film from everything below it on this list is the specific kind of intelligence it demands from the audience. Intelligence professionals who have spoken publicly about the film consistently describe it as the most accurate depiction of how real espionage actually operates. Not the action, not the bureaucracy, but the quiet meetings and the institutional loyalty that makes it almost impossible to believe a colleague could be a traitor. The way paranoia corrodes every relationship once it takes hold. What most people don't know is that le Carre based the mole at the center of the story on Kim Philby, a real British intelligence officer who worked as a Soviet spy for decades, who was trusted completely by everyone around him, and who eventually defected to Moscow in 1963 after finally coming under suspicion. Philby had tea with the Queen. The guy was liked by everyone, but he was somehow handing over British secrets to the KGB the entire time. Tinker Tailor deserves the level 3 spot because it makes you feel what it truly means to be an intelligence officer: the loneliness, the institutional distrust, and the grinding moral exhaustion of living in a world where nothing is what it seems, and no one can be fully trusted, not even yourself. Yes, Tinker Tailor drowns you in the internal cost of the spy world. But let's talk about a film that strips all of that away and places one ordinary man in the middle of a real historical standoff, where the wrong decision doesn't just cost him his peace of mind, it costs him everything. Number 4. Bridge of Spies. 1957, an ordinary American lawyer was handed the most dangerous negotiation of the Cold War, and told to do it alone, in secret, and in a city that had just been split in half by a concrete wall. What this lawyer pulled off should not have been possible, but the real question I ask myself to date is, how does a film built almost entirely around conversation and diplomacy generate more tension than most action spy movies with twice the budget? Bridge of Spies was directed by Steven Spielberg and stars Tom Hanks as James Donovan, a Brooklyn insurance lawyer who was asked by the American Bar Association to defend Rudolph Abel, a Soviet spy arrested in New York in 1957. Donovan takes the case seriously. He argues against the death penalty on the grounds that Abel might one day be useful for prisoner exchange, but he is ridiculed for it. His home is shot at, and the broader American public considers his defense of a Soviet spy to be a form of treason. Ultimately, Donovan was successful in his primary goal of saving Abel from the death penalty, but several years later, when American U-2 pilot Francis Gary Powers was shot down over Soviet airspace in 1960 and captured, the CIA came back to Donovan and asked him to negotiate an exchange: Abel for Powers, entirely without official government backing or diplomatic immunity. The film earned 6 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, and Mark Rylance won Best Supporting Actor for his portrayal of Rudolph Abel, a performance so controlled and dry that he manages to be one of the most compelling characters in the film, while saying almost nothing of consequence. Without any argument, Bridge of Spies snatches the level 4 spot because it does something genuinely rare. It takes away the normal action sequence from spy movies and makes diplomacy feel like the most courageous act imaginable. The tension lives entirely in conversations, in rooms, and in the pauses between sentences. This film was satisfying for me to watch, but moral clarity, as satisfying as it is unknown quantity. The next movie on this list doesn't give you moral clarity. It gives you something more uncomfortable and far more addictive. However, before we get to it, if this kind of deep breakdown is what you're into, subscribe. Number 5. The Bourne Identity. A man wakes up floating in the ocean with 2 bullets in his back and no memory of who he is. And that single image changed the spy genre so completely. But here's the question all movie lovers are scared to ask. Did The Bourne Identity earn its place in history because it was genuinely great, or because most spy movies around this time were so bad that it just looked great by comparison? The Bourne Identity was directed by Doug Liman and stars Matt Damon as Jason Bourne, a CIA operative pulled out of the Mediterranean with no identification, no memory, and a Swiss bank account number embedded in his hip. What he gradually pieces together, through fragments, through muscle memory, through the terrifying discovery that he can dismantle a room full of trained agents with his bare hands, is that he was part of a Black Ops program called Threadstone, designed to create the perfect assassin, and that the CIA is now trying to kill him to keep that program buried. The film was made on a budget of $60 million and grossed $214 million worldwide. It spawned 3 direct sequels and a spin-off, and its influence on the genre is almost impossible to overstate. Before Bourne, Hollywood spy films operate in a universe of invincibility, as the hero always won, the gadgets always worked, and the danger was always contained. But Bourne changed the formula. He bleeds, he makes mistakes, he improvises with whatever is nearby, a pen, a magazine, and a toaster. What most people don't know is how troubled the production was. Director Doug Liman and the studio were in constant conflict over the film's tone and pacing. Liman shot significant additional footage after initial test screenings. The editing process was so contentious that Liman did not return for the sequels. Paul Greengrass took over for the Bourne supremacy onwards, and it was Greengrass who developed the shaky cam aesthetic that became the franchise's visual signature. The Bourne Identity sits proudly at level 5 because it introduces genuine vulnerability to a genre that always wanted its heroes to be perfect. It proved that a spy hero could be competent and frightened at the same time, and that the most interesting version of the espionage story is not the one where the hero knows everything, but the one where the hero knows almost nothing, and is running out of time to figure the rest out. The Bourne Identity is one of my favorite spy movies, especially the genre where Bourne calls Landy from a nearby rooftop, demanding a meetup with Nikki, and as Landy tries to play dumb, he tells her he can see Nikki standing right next to her. Bourne's world has grit, paranoia, and relentless momentum, but underneath all of it, there are still rules, a mission, a conspiracy, and an enemy with a face. However, the film above it lacks that comfort. What it has instead is something far harder to survive, and replaces certainty with unpredictability. Number 6. Mission Impossible Fallout. This 2018 action spy thriller was directed by Christopher McQuarrie and stars Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt, returning for his 6th mission in the franchise. The film grossed $791 million worldwide and became the highest-grossing film in the Mission Impossible series at the time of its release. McQuarrie became the first director to make 2 consecutive Mission Impossible films, and the continuity he built between Rogue Nation and Fallout gave the 6th film something the earlier entries in the series largely lacked: genuine emotional stakes. The setup is this. Ethan Hunt is given the choice, early in the film, between completing his mission objective and saving his partner. He chooses his partner, so the mission fails, and as a result, 3 nuclear cores go missing, and the rest of the film is Hunt trying to recover what was lost while simultaneously being suspected by CIA leadership of having deliberately sabotaged the operation. The antagonist, a shadowy figure called John Lark, may or may not be someone Hunt already knows, and the climax requires Hunt to choose again between saving the world and saving the one person he has never fully let go of. What most people don't know is the physical cost of making this film. Tom Cruise broke his ankle performing a rooftop jump during production. You can actually see the break happen, and Cruise immediately scrambled off camera in the release footage. Then he returned to filming 6 weeks later, before the bone had fully healed. The halo jump sequence, filmed at real altitude at 25,000 feet above the UAE, required Cruise and Henry Cavill to perform over 100 jumps to capture the footage used in the final cut. The helicopter sequence in Kashmir was filmed with Cruise actually piloting the aircraft through the mountainous terrain. McQuarrie built the entire production around the principle that if the audience could tell the stunt was a trick, it wasn't good enough. But here's what actually elevates Fallout above pure spectacle. Ethan Hunt is not a perfect hero. He is a man who keeps choosing the personal over the professional, who keeps letting his emotional attachments override the mission, and who the people around him, including his own team, have legitimate reasons to question. The film doesn't pretend this is simply heroic. It asks whether a man who consistently prioritizes one life over millions is actually someone you want running your operations, and it leaves that question open. Fallout is a masterpiece and earns level 6 because it is the rare blockbuster spy film that gives you genuine craft at every level simultaneously: the action, the performance, the editing, the score, and an emotional argument that actually means something. Every film on this list is trying to do 1 or 2 things exceptionally well. However, the film at number 7 did something none of the others had done before, and in doing so, became the blueprint every spy movie since has worked from, right up to this day. Number 7. North by Northwest. Before James Bourne had no memory, before Ethan Hunt had an impossible mission, before George Smiley sat across a table from a traitor, before any of it, there was a man in a gray suit running across an open field with a crop duster trying to kill him, and absolutely no idea how he got there. So what makes North by Northwest not just the best spy film ever made, but also the one film on this list that the rest of the genre is still catching up to? North by Northwest was directed by Alfred Hitchcock and released in 1959. It stars Cary Grant as Roger Thornhill, a New York advertising executive who is mistaken for a government agent named George Kaplan by a group of foreign spies, and then immediately framed for murder when he tries to clear his name. He goes on the run across the entire United States, chased by the real spies, hunted by the police, assisted by a mysterious woman named Eve Kendall, played by Eva Marie Saint, and gradually pulled deeper into a conspiracy involving the CIA, a shadowy villain named Philip Van Dam, played by James Mason, and a government secret being smuggled out of the country inside a piece of sculpture. The crop duster sequence, the United Nations scene, the auction house escape, and the Mount Rushmore finale are not just great set pieces. They're the template. Every thriller that came after North by Northwest borrowed from its structure. The wrong man dragged into a world he doesn't understand. The woman who may or may not be trustworthy. The villain who is charming and civilized and utterly without mercy. The globe-trotting momentum that never lets the protagonist rest long enough to think clearly. The producers of the James Bond franchise, when developing Dr. No in 1962, openly cited North by Northwest as the model for what the Bond films should feel like. What most people don't know is that George Kaplan, the government agent Thornhill is mistaken for, does not actually exist. He's a fictional identity created by the CIA to divert enemy attention from its real operative. The entire plot of the film is set in motion by a decoy. Thornhill is hunted, chased, shot at, and nearly killed because of a man who was never real, and the CIA, far from trying to rescue him, is content to let him remain in danger as long as it protects their actual operation. What makes this film really exceptional is that Cary Grant was 55 during filming, yet he performs the entire film with the effortless physical grace of someone 20 years younger. He is not stoic, he complains, he makes mistakes, he gets drunk when he shouldn't, he trusts people he shouldn't, and somehow, through a combination of luck and sheer stubbornness, he survives. The film understands that the most interesting kind of hero is not the one who is always in control, but the one who keeps going anyway, even when everything is falling apart. North by Northwest earns the top of this list because it is the most complete spy film ever made. It is funny and tense and romantic and politically sharp and visually stunning all at the same time, without any of those qualities getting in the way of the others. Every film on this list took one or two things from Hitchcock's playbook, but none of them took all of it. Which of these films do you think we ranked wrong? And which spy movie do you think should have made this list but didn't? Drop it in the comments below, and for more breakdowns like this, watch this video right here.